My mom said, "We used almost all your savings to buy your sister a Range Rover." My sister laughed and said, "Enjoy walking like the failure you are." But I started laughing so hard Dad went silent, because they had no idea what account they had just touched. The Range Rover was parked in the driveway when I pulled up for Sunday dinner. White, tinted windows, 22-inch wheels, temporary dealer tags still in the rear window from Hendrick on South Boulevard. The chrome trim caught the late afternoon sun and threw a bar of light across the garage door like a signal that something in this family had shifted, and I was the last one to find out. My Sprinter van looked like a work truck next to it, because it was a work truck. Paws out mobile vet on the side panel. A fold-out exam table behind the rear doors. A portable X-ray machine strapped to the floor. 200 dog hairs on the passenger seat, despite the lint roller I keep in the console. That van is my office, my clinic, and the reason I have $142,000 in a business account my family has never seen. Theo was in the back seat of my van unbuckling his booster. He saw the car before I did. "Mama, whose car is that?" "I do not know yet." I did. The color, the trim level, the dealer tags from Hendrick on South Boulevard. My sister Rhea had been posting screenshots of Range Rover sport configurations in the family group chat for 3 months. White exterior, tan interior, 22-inch wheels. She had circled the monthly payment in one screenshot and typed, "If someone loved me, they would make this happen." Nobody responded. I muted the chat. My vet bag was on the passenger seat where it always sits, brown leather, worn at the corners. My initials, WJ, embossed on the flap by Mavis Finch the day I started Paws Out Mobile Vet 8 years ago. The bag held my portable stethoscope, my pen light, my thermometer, and a collapsible bowl Theo used to give water to the dogs after appointments. I picked it up and slung it over my shoulder because I do not walk into any building without it. It is the first thing I bought for the business, and it will be the last thing I sell. The front door was open. I could hear Mom in the kitchen. I could hear Rhea's voice in the living room, loud and bright, the voice she uses when she has won something and needs the room to know it before the room decides on its own. Dad was at the kitchen table. Burke Jessup, 62. He had a glass of sweet tea in his hand, and his eyes were on the table, and he was not talking. That was the first thing I noticed. Dad talks at every dinner. He comments on the food, he asks Theo about school, he tells a story about the printing plant he used to work at before the layoff. Tonight he was silent. His jaw was working on nothing. His thumb was rubbing the side of his glass. He knew something. I did not know what yet. But his silence had the specific weight of a man who is sitting at a table waiting for a conversation he cannot prevent. Mom came out of the kitchen with a casserole dish and set it on the table. Nita Jessup, 60. She was smiling the way she smiles when she has done something she considers generous and is waiting for gratitude. "Sit down, Wren. We have something to tell you." I sat. Theo climbed into the chair next to me and immediately reached for a roll. Rhea walked in from the living room, 30 years old. She was wearing new sunglasses pushed up on her head and a blouse I had never seen. Dex was behind her, scrolling his phone, contributing nothing to the room the way he always contributes nothing. Rhea did not sit. She stood at the end of the table with her arms folded and her chin lifted. Mom cleared her throat. "Your father and I used some of your savings to help your sister. She needed reliable transportation. The old car was not safe. We put a down payment on the Range Rover in the driveway, some of my savings, most of it, Wren, $64,500. It was the right thing to do. Your sister needs to present herself professionally for job interviews and networking. You understand. $64,500. From the account at First Union Credit Union. The account I had been building for 8 years. The account that held $67,000 as of last Tuesday. The account Mom had access to through the emergency debit card I gave her 3 years ago when Dad had a kidney stone and needed a prescription filled at 2 a.m. and I was on an emergency farm call in Cabarrus County. The emergency card. For emergencies. Mom used it to buy a Range Rover. Rhea smiled. Not at me. Past me. The way a person smiles when they are looking at themselves in a mirror that happens to have someone else standing in the frame. Enjoy walking like the failure you are, Wren. You drive a van full of dog hair and flea spray. You make house calls to people who cannot afford a real vet. Theo goes to school in that van. I bet his friends think his mom is a dog catcher. She put her hands on her hips. I have a Range Rover now. You have a stethoscope and a parking ticket. Welcome to the difference between us. She said that with my 9-year-old son sitting 4 feet from her. He had a roll in his hand and butter on his thumb, and he was watching his aunt describe his mother's life as a punchline. Theo goes to school in that van. His friends think his mom is a dog catcher. She weaponized my child's daily life in front of him. Dad had not moved. His thumb was still on the glass. His eyes were still on the table. He had not looked at me since I sat down. He had not defended me. He had not clarified. He had not done the one thing I expected him to do, which was tell the room what he knew. Because Burke Jessup knew something that nobody else at that table understood. He knew what that account was connected to. He knew because he was in the room 5 years ago when we sat across from. A loan officer at First Union Credit Union and I signed a mortgage, and he co-signed as guarantor, and the deed to the house we were all sitting in, right now, transferred from the bank's foreclosure file to a name that was not his. My name. The account they emptied paid the mortgage on the house they were eating dinner in, and the house was mine. I started laughing. Not a polite laugh. Not a nervous laugh. Not the laugh you produce when someone makes a joke and you want to be gracious. This was the laugh that happens when the math completes itself in your head and the answer is so perfectly structurally absurd that your body does not know what else to do with the information. The laugh that lives in the space between fury and clarity, where you realize that the people who just called you a failure are eating dinner inside a building that exists because you signed a check they do not know about. The laugh came out of me in 3 waves. The first wave was disbelief. The second was the math. The third was the image of the default notice that would arrive at this house in 30 days addressed to my name. Dad's thumb stopped moving on the glass. His eyes came up from the table for the first time all evening. He looked at me, and his face changed, not confusion, recognition, the specific, terrible recognition of a man who has been keeping a secret for 5 years and has just heard the one sound that means the secret is about to stop being kept. He knew. He knew what the account was connected to. He knew because he was at the closing table in March 2021 and he signed the co-signer line and he watched the deed transfer to Wren Jessup and he drove home and told his wife he worked it out with the bank and never mentioned my name. He knew that the $240 monthly payment came from the account his wife had just emptied. He knew that the mortgage was mine. He knew that the house was mine. And he watched his wife and his younger daughter drain the account, and he said nothing, because saying something would mean admitting what he had let me do 5 years ago and what he had let his family believe ever since. Mom's smile faded. The casserole dish was still steaming. Rhea's arms unfolded. Dex looked up from his phone for the first time. "What is so funny?" Rhea's voice had lost its shine. The Range Rover confidence was still on her face, but it was slipping at the edges. I wiped my eyes. I picked up my vet bag from the floor where I had set it next to my chair. I looked at Theo. "Let us go, baby, but I did not eat yet. We will eat at home." Theo took the roll with him. We walked out. The Range Rover gleamed in the driveway. I walked past it. I put Theo in the van. I put the vet bag on the passenger seat. I started the engine. I did not tell them what was funny. They would find out in 30 days. If you are watching this and you have ever been called a failure by the people who are living inside the life you paid for, you are in the right place. Welcome to Family Secret Tales. That night, I sat at the kitchen table in my apartment with the vet bag on the counter and a glass of water and my laptop open and a feeling in my chest that was not anger. It was architecture. The feeling of seeing the full blueprint for the first time and understanding which walls are load-bearing and which ones are decorative and which one you need to remove to bring the whole structure into the light. I logged into First Union Credit Union. Savings account balance $2,500. Last transaction, withdrawal $64,500, debit card ending 4018. Mom's card. The emergency card. Then I opened the mortgage portal. Property address 1847 Millbrook Lane, Charlotte, NC. Monthly payment $2,340. Next payment due September 1st. 11 days away. Account linked for autopay, the savings account, the one that now had $2,500 in it. The September payment would clear, barely. $2,500 minus $2,340 leaves $160. But October's payment would not clear, and November's would not clear. And by December, the bank would send a default notice, addressed to the mortgage holder, addressed to Wren Jessup, to the house at 1847 Millbrook Lane, where my parents and my sister's boyfriend were currently living under a roof they believed was theirs. I pulled the closing documents from the fireproof safe in my bedroom closet. The folder was labeled Millbrook Mortgage 2021 in my handwriting. Inside, the deed, the mortgage agreement, the closing statement, and on the last page of the closing statement, 2 signatures, mine and Dad's. Burke Jessup, co-signer. March 15, 2021, his handwriting, his driver's license photocopy attached. He had sat across from the loan officer and watched the deed transfer from the bank's foreclosure file to my name. He had watched me put down $42,000 from my savings. He had watched me take on a $198,000 mortgage because his credit score was 512, and the house was 4 months behind, and the pre-foreclosure notice was taped to the front door when I drove over that February morning. He saved his family's home by letting his daughter buy it. And then he told his wife he worked it out with the bank. He never told Mom the deed changed hands. He never told Rhea. He let the family believe the house was still a family house for 5 years, while I paid $2,340 every month from the account his wife just emptied to buy his other daughter a Range Rover. I almost called him right there. Almost picked up the phone and said the mortgage amount and the deed name and listened to the 5 years of silence collapse. But Theo was asleep in the next room with the bread roll still on his nightstand, and my vet bag was on the counter, and Mavis always told me the same thing about difficult cases. Do not diagnose until you have all the labs. I called Mavis instead. Mavis Finch, 64. She had been my mentor since vet tech school. She owned the building my van was parked behind. She had given me the vet bag on my first solo call. She had co-signed my first equipment loan. She had seen me through the divorce, the business launch, the first year when I made $22,000 and wondered if the van was a mistake. She had said, the van is never a mistake. The van is the business. Everybody else has a building. You have wheels. Wheels go where the patients are. They emptied the account, I told her, $64,500 for a Range Rover, for Rhea. Mavis was quiet for 3 seconds. The account that pays the mortgage? Yes, on the house they live in? Yes, the house in your name? Yes, Mavis let out a long breath. How much is in your business account? $142,000. They do not know it exists. Good. Transfer the mortgage autopay to the business account tomorrow. Protect your credit. Then let the math do the rest. Mavis, they called me a failure. In front of Theo. They said I drive a van full of dog hair. That van makes $180,000 a year. The Range Rover is going to make $748 a month in payments until Rhea cannot cover it. The van is not the failure, Wren. If you have ever been mocked for the vehicle that carries your livelihood while the people mocking you live in a house your livelihood pays for, subscribe to Family Secret Tales and hit the bell. Monday morning. I sat at my desk in the warehouse office behind the van. The vet bag was on the counter. Theo's school backpack was by the door where he had dropped it before his carpool picked him up. I logged into the First Union Credit Union portal and switched the mortgage autopay source from the savings account to the Pause Out LLC business account at Atlantic Federal. The transfer took 4 clicks. The mortgage would continue to be paid, my credit would be protected, my parents would not lose the house. Not yet. The savings account sat at $2. $500 and would do nothing because there was nothing left for it to do. Then I opened a spreadsheet and did what Mavis taught me to do on every complicated case. I ran the numbers. Mortgage $23 and $40 per month times 60 months equals $140,400. Property tax supplement $398 per month, $23,080 over 5 years. Homeowner's insurance $185 per month, $11,100. Water and sewer $95 per month, $5,700. Down payment at closing $42,000. Total $223,080. I had paid $223,080 worth in 5 years to keep a roof over the heads of a family that called me a failure, who drives a van full of dog hair, and they had rewarded me by taking $64,500 from the same account to buy a car for the daughter who told my 9-year-old son that his friends think his mother is a dog catcher. I printed the spreadsheet. I put it in the mortgage folder. I closed the fireproof safe. I picked up the vet bag and walked to the van because I had a 10 a.m. appointment with a diabetic tabby in Huntersville, and the cat did not care who owned what house or what car was in what driveway. The cat needed insulin, and I was the person who could give it. That was the difference between my work and theirs. My work did not require anyone to believe in it. It just required me to show up. Mavis called me at lunch. I was parked at a Sheetz eating a turkey wrap with the van doors open and the breeze coming through. "Did you transfer the autopay?" she asked. "Done. What is the total?" 5 years, $223,080, not counting the $64,500 they took. Mavis was quiet for 4 seconds. $223,000 from a van. From a van. Wren, do not let anyone in that family tell you what a failure looks like. A failure does not generate $223,000 in housing support while running a solo veterinary practice from a converted Sprinter. That is not failure. That is architecture. I walked to the police station on 4th Street on Tuesday afternoon. The vet bag was in the van. Theo was at school. The parking lot was half empty, and the lobby smelled like floor cleaner and burnt coffee. I filed a report. Unauthorized withdrawal of $64,500 from a savings account using a debit card issued for emergency purposes only. I brought the card agreement, which I had kept in the fireproof safe with the mortgage documents. The agreement specified card to be used for medical emergencies, prescription costs, and urgent household expenses only. I brought the bank statement showing the withdrawal. I brought the Range Rover purchase receipt that Rhea had posted on Instagram showing a down payment of $64,500 on a $72,000 vehicle. The officer, a woman in her 40s with reading glasses and a patient expression, typed everything into the system. She read the card agreement twice. The cardholder used an emergency designated debit card to make a $64,500 withdrawal for a vehicle purchase, she summarized. That does not meet any of the stated emergency criteria. No, it does not. Is the cardholder your mother? Yes. And the vehicle is registered to your sister? Yes. She assigned a case number. A paper trail now connected the Range Rover's down payment to an unauthorized withdrawal from an account owned by Wren Jessup. The paper trail was clean and dated and stamped, and it was not going away. I almost dropped the report on the way out, almost stopped at the lobby door and told myself that filing a police report against my own mother was a line that could not be uncrossed. But then I thought about Theo's face at the dinner table when Rhea said dog catcher. I thought about the roll in his hand and the butter on his thumb and the way he looked at me when his aunt described my life as a punchline. The line was already crossed the moment they emptied my account and laughed about it. I was not crossing a line. I was documenting where it used to be. 30 days passed. The September mortgage payment cleared from the business account. My credit was intact. The savings account sat at $160 after a small automatic fee. The house on Millbrook Lane continued to function. The water ran. The lights stayed on. Mom cooked dinners. Dad watched television. Rhea parked the Range Rover in the driveway every night and posted photos of it on Instagram with captions about manifestation and leveling up. Nobody noticed that the mortgage payment had come from a different account. Nobody noticed because nobody in that house had ever looked at a mortgage statement, because nobody in that house knew there was a mortgage statement to look at. On October 3rd, the default notice arrived. Not a late notice, a default notice. Because I had let October's payment lapse deliberately. I had transferred the autopay to the business account in August to protect my credit for the September payment. September cleared, then I turned off the autopay. October's payment did not go through. The bank waited 15 days, then 30. Then they sent the notice. I almost made the October payment, almost logged into the business account and scheduled the transfer, and kept the house running the way I had kept it running for 5 years without acknowledgement. But then I opened the Instagram app and saw Rhea's latest post, the Range Rover in a parking garage, overhead lighting. Caption, God's timing is everything, 847 likes. And I closed the app and I let the payment sit where it was, which was nowhere. The bank sent the default notice to the property address addressed to the mortgage holder. Addressed to Wren Jessup, to the house at 1847 Millbrook Lane, where my parents and my sister's boyfriend were currently living under a roof they believed belonged to them. Mom opened it. She opens all the mail. She has opened every piece of mail that enters that house for 32 years. She tore the envelope with her thumb and pulled out the letter and read the first line. Dear Miss Jessup, your mortgage payment of $2,340 for the property at 1847 Millbrook Lane was not received by the due date of October 1st, 2026. She read it twice. She turned it over. She read the account number. She read the property address. She read my name at the top and my name at the bottom, and she stood in the kitchen of a house she had lived in for 32 years and discovered that the house had belonged to her older daughter for 5 of those years, and she had never known because her husband had never told her. She called me at 4:47 p.m. Her voice was vibrating at a frequency I had never heard from her. The frequency of a woman whose floor has just become a trapdoor. Wren, there is a letter here from First Union. It says your name. It says mortgage. It says this address. What is this? That is the mortgage on the house you live in, Mom. What are you talking about? Your father owns this house. Dad does not own the house. I own the house. I bought it 5 years ago when Dad's credit collapsed and the bank was going to foreclose. I refinanced it in my name. I put down $42,000. I have been paying the mortgage every month for 5 years, $2,340 a month. From the savings account you emptied to buy Rhea a Range Rover. Silence. 6 seconds. I could hear the paper shaking in her hand. That is not possible. Your father told me he worked it out with the bank. He worked it out by sitting next to me at a closing table while I signed a mortgage, and he co-signed as guarantor. He watched the deed transfer to my name. He was in the room. Mom, ask him. Burke. Mom's voice pulled away from the phone. I could hear her calling his name from the kitchen. Burke, get in here right now. I heard Dad's footsteps. Heavy, slow, the footsteps of a man who has been waiting 5 years for this conversation and still does not know what to say. That account paid your mortgage, Mom. Your house is in my name. Dad signed the transfer 5 years ago. Ask him. I hung up. The next 48 hours on Millbrook Lane were, according to Mavis, who heard it from her neighbor Glennis, who attends the same church as Mom, the loudest and quietest hours that house had seen in 30 years. Loud because Mom confronted Dad in the kitchen within an hour of hanging up on me. Quiet because after the confrontation, nobody spoke. Dad admitted everything. The pre-foreclosure notice from 2021 that he had pulled off the front door before Mom saw it. The credit score of 5 or 12 that meant he could not refinance on his own. The morning he called me and asked if I could help. The closing table where he sat across from a loan officer and watched the deed transfer from the bank's foreclosure file to a document that said Wren Jessup at the top. The co-signer line. The $42,000 down payment that came from my savings. The same savings I had built from the van he called a phase when I bought it. The 5 years of mortgage payments he never mentioned. The lie he told Mom, I worked it out with the bank. Mom did not yell after the admission. That was the quiet part. She stopped talking to him entirely. For 4 days, she cooked meals and put his plate on the table and did not sit across from him and did not look at him and did not say his name. She slept in Ria's old bedroom. She did not answer his questions. She answered the phone when Ria called, and the conversation lasted 14 minutes, and at the end of it, Ria said the sentence that summarized everything she had learned and nothing she had understood. That is not possible. She drives a van. She drives a van, as if the vehicle a person drives determines whether they can own a house. As if a converted Sprinter with a fold-out exam table and a portable X-ray machine and a client list of 412 families is not a business but a punchline. As if the $180,000 in annual revenue that van generates is less real than a Range Rover financed with stolen money. 1 week after the default notice, I sent the formal letter. Certified mail. Wren Jessup, property owner, to Burke and Nita Jessup, current occupants. The letter offered 2 options. Option 1, pay $2,800 per month in rent beginning November 1st. Option 2, vacate the property within 60 days. Mom called at 6 a.m. the next morning. Her voice was raw and cracked and stripped of every layer of warmth and management she usually wraps around her words. You are charging us rent? On our own house? We have lived here for 32 years, Wren. Your father and I raised you in this house. It is not your house, Mom. It has not been your house for 5 years. The deed says Wren Jessup. The mortgage says Wren Jessup. The property tax bill says Wren Jessup. Every document in the county recorder's office says Wren Jessup. You just never looked because you assumed your daughter, the dog catcher, could not own a building. This is your father's home. Dad is a co-signer, not an owner. He helped me qualify for the mortgage. That is all. He signed the paperwork. He was in the room. He watched the deed transfer. And then he came home and told you he worked it out with the bank. Which was true in the narrowest possible way because the way he worked it out was by letting me pay for everything. Your father is going to fix this. Dad cannot fix a deed transfer, Mom. He could not fix his credit score 5 years ago, and he cannot fix his name onto a deed that has never had his name on it. The house is mine. The decision is yours. $2,800 a month or 60 days. Where are we supposed to go? That is a question you should have asked before you spent $64,500 of my money on a Range Rover for a 30-year-old woman who called me a dog catcher in front of my son. She hung up. I could hear the phone hit a surface before the line cut. Something ceramic rattled. A dish or a cup knocked against a counter by a hand that was shaking. If you have ever sent a certified letter to the house you own and watched the people who live in it realize they are tenants, subscribe to Family Secret Tales. 2 weeks later, Burke drove to my apartment. He arrived at 7 p.m. on a weekday. He was holding a folder, the same folder from the fireproof safe at Millbrook Lane. The closing documents, my mortgage agreement, my deed, He had a typed letter paper clipped to the front. One page. His proposal: transfer the house back to his name. In exchange, he would ensure that Mom and Rhea repaid the $64,500 over 3 years. He would drop the matter of the police report. He stood in my doorway with the folder and the letter and the look of a man who has come to negotiate the return of something he does not own. I took the folder. I opened it to the last page. The closing statement. 2 signatures. Mine and his. March 15th, 2021, I held the page up so he could see his own handwriting through the screen door. His co-signer's signature. The date. His driver's license number. The line that read, "Guarantor, not owner." He read it. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He knew what it said. He had known for 5 years. He had signed it in a room with a loan officer and his daughter, and a pen that was chained to the desk, and he had walked out of that room and told his wife he worked it out, and never said my name. I closed the folder. I handed it back through the screen door. I almost let him in. Almost opened the screen door and sat him at my kitchen table and told him I understood why he did it, that pride is a structure too, and sometimes it collapses under the weight of what a man cannot say to his wife. But understanding why he lied is not the same as accepting that the lie lasted 5 years and ended with my savings account emptied and my son called a dog catcher's kid at a dinner table in a house that my van paid for. That is your signature, Dad. You were in the room. You watched me put down $42,000 and take on $198,000 in debt so your family would not lose their home. And then you went home and told Mom you worked it out with the bank. You erased me from the story. For 5 years. He took the folder. He stood on the mat for 8 seconds. Then he turned and walked to his truck and sat in the driver's seat and did not start the engine for 2 minutes. Through the screen door, I watched him hold the steering wheel and look at the folder on the passenger seat. He drove away. The Range Rover was flagged in the police report as a vehicle purchased with funds from an unauthorized withdrawal. The investigation was ongoing. The $64,500 down payment was traceable through the bank's records. Rhea's name was on the purchase agreement. Mom's debit card transaction matched the withdrawal. The paper trail was clean. Rhea called me 3 days after the rent demand letter arrived. She had heard from Mom. Her voice was not the voice from the dinner table. The Range Rover confidence was gone. What replaced it was the thin, brittle tone of a person who is angry and frightened and trying to make both emotions sound like one. You cannot kick our parents out of their house. It is my house, Rhea, it is the family house. We grew up there, and I paid for it. For 5 years. $2,340 a month. From the account you emptied to buy a car you cannot afford. Mom said Dad signed something. That does not make it yours. It is a deed, Rhea, a property deed. Recorded at the county. Dad was at the closing. He co-signed the mortgage. He watched me put down $42,000 because his credit score was 512 and the bank was going to foreclose. 3 seconds of silence. Then, why did you not tell anyone? I told Dad. He was in the room. He chose not to tell you. Ask him why. This is insane. You are a vet tech who drives a van. You do not own a house. People who drive vans and make house calls to farm animals do not own houses. People who drive vans and make house calls to farm animals paid $223,000 into the house you are standing in right now. People who drive Range Rovers bought with stolen money are standing in a building they do not own, calling the owner a failure. That is what is actually insane, Rhea. You are not the owner. Go to the Mecklenburg County Recorder's website. Type in the address. Read the name on the deed. I will wait. 12 seconds of silence. I could hear her typing. I could hear the screen loading. I could hear the moment her breathing changed because she had found the name, and the name was not Burke Jessup, and the name was not Jessup family. trust, and the name was Wren Marie Jessup, and the address was 1847. Millbrook Lane, and the deed date was March 2021, and the world she had been standing on for 5 years was not the world she thought it was. She hung up. That was the last direct conversation I had with my sister. Rhea stopped posting photos of the Range Rover on Instagram 3 weeks after the police report was filed. She removed every photo, every story, every reel of her driving with the window down and the caption about leveling up. She set her account to private. Dex moved out of the Millbrook Lane house the same week. Dex left on a Tuesday morning. He packed 2 duffel bags, his PlayStation, 3 pairs of sneakers, and a protein powder container that was 2/3 empty. He left his key on the kitchen counter next to the mail pile that now included the default notice, the rent demand letter, and a property tax statement addressed to Wren Jessup. He told Rhea on his way out, "I did not sign up for a fraud investigation. I signed up for a Range Rover and a house. You do not have either." He drove away in a Honda Civic. Rhea watched from the porch. The Range Rover was behind her in the driveway. White chrome catching the morning light the way it caught the light the day Mom parked it there for the reveal. But the temporary tags were expired now. The first insurance payment had bounced, and the police report was in a system Rhea could not delete by setting her profile to private. The social fallout spread outward from the family the way all family collapses spread, through churches, hair salons, and grocery store aisles. Mom's Bible study circle knew within a week. Dad's former co-workers from the printing plant knew within 2. The consistent detail in every retelling was the same. The daughter they called a failure owned the house. The van they mocked paid the mortgage. And the Range Rover was bought with money that did not belong to the woman who drove it. Burke sat at the kitchen table on Millbrook Lane 3 weeks after the Folder visit. It was a Wednesday evening. The house was dim. 1 lamp on. The closing documents were spread open in front of him. Not in the folder anymore, spread flat, every page visible. The deed, the mortgage agreement, the closing statement, his co-signer's signature on the last page, the handwriting he had been looking at every night since Wren held it up through the screen door. He was not reading the documents, he had memorized them. He was sitting with them the way a man sits at a graveside, not to learn something new, but to be present with what he already knows. The mortgage default was still active. He had called the bank twice. Both times the representative told him the same thing. The mortgage holder is Wren Jessup. We can only discuss the account with the named holder. His name was on the mortgage as a co-signer, not as a holder, not as an owner. He had helped his daughter buy the house, and then he had spent 5 years pretending the help had never happened, because admitting it would mean admitting he could not do it alone. And now he was sitting at a table in a house he did not own, reading documents he had signed, waiting for a porch light that was not his to turn off. Mom was in the bedroom with the door shut. She had been sleeping in Rhea's old room since the confrontation. Rhea had not visited in 2 weeks. The Range Rover was in the driveway. It had not moved in 4 days because Rhea could not afford the $748 monthly insurance payment that came due on the 15th, and nobody was going to pay it for her because the person who used to pay for everything had stopped. The house was quiet the way a house gets quiet when the person who was keeping it alive stops and the people inside realize that the silence is not peace. It is the sound of a bill that has been paid by someone else for 5 years finally coming due. Saturday morning. November, my van is parked outside a farmhouse in Cabarrus County. Theo is in the passenger seat doing math homework with a pencil that needs sharpening. The vet bag is on the console between us, the leather warm from the heater vent, the WJ initials catching the morning light the way they have caught it on 400 house calls and 1,200 farm visits. I just finished a wellness check on a 14-year-old golden retriever named Biscuit, who is too old to ride in a car to a clinic. His owner, an 81-year-old woman named Mrs. Canfield, paid me $185 in cash and told Theo he was the best vet assistant she had ever seen. Theo beamed. He had held Biscuit's leash and talked to him the entire exam. Mavis Finch is meeting us at the warehouse in an hour with coffee and a contractor's estimate for a second van. The business needs to expand. The client list is at 412 families and growing. Revenue last year, $184,000. The Paws Out LLC business account balance is $142,000 after the mortgage transfers. The savings account at First Union has $160 in it. I will close it next week. I do not need an emergency card anymore. The only emergencies in my life now are the kind that involve animals, and those I can handle with the bag on the seat beside me. Mavis told me something last week that I have been carrying since. She called after the RIA conversation, after the rent demand, after the Burke folder visit. She said, "Wren, you did not build this business to prove anything to them. You built it because you are good at it. The fact that it also paid for their house is not irony. It is evidence. Evidence of who you were the whole time while they were deciding you were not enough." Theo puts down his pencil and picks up the vet bag. He runs his thumb over the WJ initials the way I run my thumb over them before every house call. He has watched me carry this bag into 400 homes and 1,200 barns, and he has never once been embarrassed by what it means. He has never once looked at the van and seen a failure. He has looked at the van and seen his mother going to work. "Mom, does Aunt Rhea really think you are a dog catcher?" I look at him. At the bag in his hands. At the van parked outside with the exam table folded and the X-ray machine stowed and the Paws Out logo on the side that Theo helped me design when he was 7. At the farmhouse behind us where Biscuit is sleeping on a heated bed. At the $185 in cash in the console. At the math homework on his lap with a problem about fractions that he will solve because he is 9 and curious, and he does not know yet that some people will look at his mother's van and see a ceiling. She thinks the van is the failure, Theo, but the van paid for the house she is sitting in. The van paid for the driveway her Range Rover is parked in. The van paid for the roof over her head for 5 years. And the van is still running. Theo looks at the van. At the vet bag. At me. That is a good van. Mavis's voice is in my head. The van is never a mistake. The van is the business. Everybody else has a building. You have wheels. The vet bag catches the morning light on the console. Brown leather. Worn at the corners where 8 years of house calls have softened the edges. WJ on the flap. Mavis's gift. The first thing I owned in this business and the last thing I will ever let go. The Range Rover has not moved in 4 days. The insurance lapsed. The temporary tags expired. The Instagram posts are deleted. The driveway it sits in belongs to someone else. The van has not stopped moving in 8 years. And it is not going to stop now.